As mentioned, we're going to begin with chapter 13, found on page 152. This chapter deals predominantly with what's known as the Beinoni, that's the intermediate, complex life. Yes, Sha'akol. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'akol niyeh b'dvaro. And I want to thank the Sharp sponsoring tonight's, so much obliged to tonight's sponsors. All right, here we go. Round of applause and a full mouth. So last week we were discussing more exactly the intermediary. What is exactly intermediary? And we kind of concluded that in this case, the Beinoni has an evil inclination, has an animal soul, but does not sin. He's tempted to sin. The animal soul rears its ugly head periodically from time to time, but ultimately the Beinoni always succeeds in overcoming the temptations of the animal soul. So if you remember back at the beginning of chapter 1, Alter Rebbe left us with a number of questions. Namely, when they came to the Beinoni, for example, he said that Rabbah, the Maria, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hold on one second. How do I do this? Stop mute. Now you hear me? Stop video. No. Unmute.
Yes, hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Oh,
yeah.
Still don't hear
better.
me.
No,
I'm not.
I can hear you,
You
Rabbi.
hear me? Okay. Perfect. All right. So going back to the Beinoni, we're going to describe. We're going to answer a number. You hear me? Okay. Thank you. We're going to answer some of the questions the Alter Rebbe had in chapter 1 regarding the Beinoni. I'll keep it as that. We'll start with the text, page 152. Tell you, Moshe Maimer of saying. I'm gonna take. Stop. See me. Can you hear anybody? Can you speak up if you hear me?
You're fading in and out. You drop out, and then I can.
Can you guys? Yeah, I know, because I'm outside. How about if everybody shuts off their video part and just since the audio takes less bandwidth?
Okay.
We can try that.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm gonna try this on to see if this works better. 1 second, please. Zoom. So upcoming meetings, practical Tanya. Start.
Progress. Recording in progress.
Okay, hold on 1 second, folks. Yeah, recording time.
Rabbi, if you're talking, I cannot hear anything for about the last 15 seconds.
Me either.
Nor can I.
It's on. It's recording.
Oh, okay.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, now.
Okay. So
Now I can. Now I can.
Okay. All right. I'm just using my phone. Hopefully, it's not going to die before the class is over. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm outdoors and the Wi-Fi is not great here. I'm just going off my phone.
Oh, I wondered what that
if-
was. Okay, the
yeah,
Yeah,
part.
that's
if-
what it is. So I'm not on the iPad. All right.
If you-
Anyways, moving along.
If you
Let's
shut
start
off your video, it may help hearing your voice. If you shut off your video,
at this point with my phone. You should be able to hear me. Okay.
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 I'm not
I'll
using
mute you
Wi-Fi.
down.
Okay. I hope everybody else is still on. I don't know if I lost anyone else, but okay. Was there Yuvan? So with this insight into the nature of the Beinoni from chapter 12, we can understand the teaching of our sages of blessed memory. In the case of the in-betweeners, both the good and the bad impulses are their internal judges of what to do or not to do, which means their evil inclination or their good inclination. So in Psalms, it says, as the Talmud cites as the proof, God stands at the right hand of the poor person to save him from those that guide his soul. So the Talmud denies that the Beinoni is ruled by both impulses, which would imply that the evil inclination actually has some ruling over his behavior, but merely the yetzer, horah, the evil inclination sort of acts as the judge. So if you were to, in a sense, look at it as follows, let's assume you had two judges, all right, two people trying to rule. In this case, there's two judges in the body. One is the good side, one is the evil side. And each one wants to rule according to themselves. Now, obviously, only one of them can be right. So then you have a third one that comes in, the kasva shlishi, so to speak, the third verse, the third judge in this case, that's going to be the swing vote, one way or the other. Okay, it's an odd number. So in essence, what's that third vote? We're going to hear shortly of you. Who's the third judge? It's God himself. That when the Beinoni puts his best foot forward, even though the other judge, the evil inclination, is protesting and giving its opinion, but the ruling doesn't go according to him because God helps the good inclination, the godly soul, to be able to overcome the evil inclination. Okay, that's outside sort of what it is. Back to the text. Whenever the evil inclination has any control or dominance over the body, the small city, which is the body, even if for a short while, that person is classified as a Russia at that time, a wicked person, not a Beinoni. Rather, in the case of the Beinoni, the yetzer, the evil inclination is merely like, for example, a single magistrate or judge, as I explained to you, offers his legal opinion, which, however, might not be the final legal ruling, because being that there's another magistrate or judge who offers a dissenting opinion. And the third judge is required to resolve between the two. And the law follows the word of the third reconciliatory judge or view. So that's the analogy. So in a similar way, the evil inclination first states its opinion to follow a certain path of self-gratification. Its thing, the left chamber, and what it wants you to do. From the heart, it rises to the brain to be contemplated. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get what I want? And immediately it's opposed by the second judge, which is the divine soul in the brain, which then spreads to the heart's right side, the place where the good rests. Has two domains of the body. One is in the brain. Its primary residence, if you will, is in the brain, but it also resides in the right ventricle of the heart. So in this case, the right ventricle of the heart, the brain is going to be the judge that will dictate to the left side the evil inclination as to what's going to be done and how it should be done. This is the case of the Beinoni. So how is the dispute resolved? You have dispute between the good side, the bad side, or the evil inclination, good inclination. It gets resolved because the third judge, being none other than God himself, who comes immediately to assist the good inclination. So this is a fascinating thing that the Gemara brings down. The Talmud says, as our sages of blessed memory have taught, if the Holy One, blessed be He, did not assist him, he could not overcome the evil inclination, which is kind of a new insight. Meaning that if God doesn't help the Beinoni, and obviously ourselves as well, to enable our godly side, our good inclination, to overcome our evil inclination, we can never win. That's how strong and powerful the evil inclination is. So in the case of the Beinoni, that's the third magistrate.
Only for the Beinoni.
So in the case of the Beinoni, because the Beinoni never fouls up, never sins. We, myself, I'm not quite there yet as the Beinoni, at the Beinoni level. So yes, Hashem helps us, because whenever we win, we don't always win. But whenever we do win, it's with God's assistance. Because otherwise, without that, even a Russia of Tevlai, like most of us, who's a Russia that has good inculcated within them, we'd never be able to beat the evil inclination. It's just too powerful, too smart, too willy, and whatever word you want to come up with. Okay, so what exactly is this divine assistance? Does God come and say, "Dun, ta-da, here I am, here I come to save the day"? That was Mighty Mouse, never mind. But right, ultimately, how is Hashem coming in to sort of save the day here? This assistance is a glimmer of God's light shining upon the divine soul. So, as Alter Rebbe explains it, that the divine soul is really a bit of a paradox. On one hand, it's the soul. It's sort of an autonomous spiritual entity that's vested within the body. But at the same time, it's an actual part of God. So on one hand, has some level of autonomy, being that it's vested in a particular body. On the other hand, there's a higher level to the soul, which is an actual part of Hashem and never separated. There's no autonomy whatsoever. So the assistance that we're talking about here is the divine soul's ability to get in touch with its true self, to stop for a moment and think about its true self. It's not take the physical body out of it. The true self is an actual part of God. Come join us. Sorry? No, you're good. So that's what it means when Hashem comes to help the Beinoni in overcoming the evil inclination. It's basically God coming and allowing the godly soul to come in contact with the autonomy out. Okay. So when we speak about the notion that the Beinoni is still tempted and still tested by the evil inclination, we're talking about what he calls over here the unenlightened state. That's the way he translates it here. Devoid of the residual effects of contemplative prayer. Remember, we said last week that the Beinoni, while he's praying, sort of gets into this enraptured state of mind. And at that point, the evil inclination is good as dead. It's dormant. It has no voice. He can't even prop up to get a word in edgewise. But that stops once the davening stops as well. When the davening is finished, the Shema is over, the Amidah is over, that feeling's not there anymore. So the time after that, he calls the unenlightened state. They're enlightened during davening, during prayer, or learning, as we'll see shortly. But the unenlightened state is the time where the Beinoni needs that extra boost, if you will, from Hashem to ensure that his godly soul will overcome his animal soul. Okay, so section 2, we're on page 155. The Beinoni's failure to transform. Since the evil of the animal soul in the left chamber of the Beinoni's heart retains its innate strength, and still tempted to desire every worldly pleasure, and its evil was not voided by the dilution from an overwhelming amount of good, which is the hallmark of a tzaddik, an absolutely righteous person, and even its voice was not displaced permanently at all. Only temporarily during prayer, the evil inclination can't pipe up for the Beinoni. But other than that, it keeps rearing its ugly head. Rather, its evil on page 156 remains in full force, and it just lacks the control and dominance to spread its influence over the body's parts. So why can the evil inclination not spread its force over the body parts? Because even that is not due to its own merits, but because the blessed Holy One stands, quote, at the right hand of the poor person and assists him by illuminating his divine soul. In this case, the poor person is the Beinoni. Now, if you remember going back to chapter 1, the Alter Rebbe said that a person, even if the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik, just in case you walk down the street, everybody says, oh, you're such a tzaddik. You're such a righteous person. You must be the epitome of righteousness. In your own estimation, you should view yourself like a wicked person. Remember, that's from the beginning, chapter 1, a while ago. Then the Alter Rebbe also says, but if a person views themselves as being wicked, they might become despondent, depressed. Imagine walking around all day long, I'm wicked, I'm evil. They're not going to make you feel really good. So what gives? Which is it this way or is it that way? So now he explains the actual terminology that's used is kirasha, like a wicked person, not a wicked person. And there's a really big difference here. Straight up wicked person, I don't have to explain to anybody. We know what a wicked person is. Kirasha, he explains, why is it like with the chaf in front of it? So he says, going back to chapter 1, I just told it to you outside of the text, but inside, the teaching explains the teaching of our sages of blessed memory in chapter 1. Even if the entire world tells you you are a tzaddik, you should consider yourself like a Russia, Russia mamash, and not an actual Russia. Rather, what the sages mean to say to us, if the entire world tells you you are a tzaddik, you meaning the Beinoni, you should consider yourself like a Russia, which is out of a Beinoni. Why is like a Russia equated with that of a Beinoni? Because, again, does the Beinoni still have an evil inclination? He does. He doesn't give in to the evil inclination, but nonetheless, the evil inclination tries. It works hard on him, perhaps minus the times of davening and deep spiritual enlightenment. Other than that, it's a struggle. He wins the battle, but he's still struggling. So there, and the Russia, obviously the evil person has evil proclivities and constantly being tested. So the Beinoni considers himself like the Russia, meaning like the Russia in the context that he still has an evil inclination, just like the wicked person has an evil inclination. And in that case, usually wins the game. But the Beinoni also, like the Russia, still has an evil inclination. Difference being, obviously, that he overcomes it. That's where he's likened to the Russia, that they both still have an evil inclination, unlike that of the tzaddik. Follow? Good. Do not believe the world's opinion that you are a tzaddik. You are absolutely righteous, as this would mean that the evil in you has been voided by the good, which is not likely to be true. Tzaddik, this is the level of a tzaddik, as mentioned earlier, which is a very rare phenomenon. Very few people throughout history were consummate tzaddikim. Rather, in your eyes, you should look at yourself as if the deep core of evil remains with its full inborn strength in your left heart and your heart's left chamber, and it has not budged or departed from you whatsoever. So, if the Beinoni was to view himself as a tzaddik, mistakenly, he'd think the battle's over. I won. I no longer have any temptations. Well, the moment you start thinking you no longer have any temptations, guess what's going to happen? That's when the enemy strikes, okay? That could be a problem. So therefore, the Beinoni has to view himself constantly like a Russia, meaning that I still have an inclination. I know I have an inclination. Let's not get delusional over here, even though there are some times during the day where I'm in this great spiritual ecstasy, but notwithstanding, it's not sustainable in my life. It comes and goes. So that's why he's likened to a Russia. And on the contrary, not only has your animal soul failed to weaken, but with the passing of time, it actually becomes strong. Why does your animal soul become strong with the passing of time? You think, well, the older I get, the less, let's say, vigorous my animal soul seems to be. But the answer is that the more you feed your animal soul, the more it wants. It's like anything else. If you've never tried something that you're really tempted to do, the temptation is going to be there. But you have no idea how good it really is until you've actually tried it. But if you tried it and you loved it, go ahead and try and stop it the next time. It's much more difficult. And that's sort of what ends up happening is a person grows in life and age and whatnot, and life experiences and feeds the evil inclination through permitted things. Forget the forbidden things. Even permitted things, like indulging it with whatever foods it wants and drinks it wants, or whatever other physical temptations that are permitted, but just indulging, not for the sake of serving God, just because I want to feed my evil inclination. Well, then that strengthens the evil inclination day in, day out. It's like a muscle, okay? The more you use a muscle, the stronger it becomes. The less you use the muscle, it's called atrophy. As we age gracefully, we know all about atrophy, whether we want to or not. That's what ends up happening. Okay, section 3, we're at the bottom of page 157. So now we're going to talk about the tzaddik lookalike. What exactly is the tzaddik lookalike? the enlightened Beinoni might think for a moment that he became a tzaddik, right? If I get into this ecstatic spiritual frame of mind, I can easily think, you know what? Maybe I actually won. It's possible that I no longer have an evil inclination. I don't feel it. It's not bothering me. It's gone. So page 158, even a person for whom God's Torah is his delight, and he studies it day and night, lishma, for the sake of serving Hashem. It's not just an academic pursuit. Studying for the sake, the devotion is it for God's sake. Nevertheless, he should not consider himself a tzaddik. That means if you spend your entire day studying Torah, minus sleeping and eating and drinking, you still don't consider yourself to be a tzaddik. You can say, well, I mean, if I can sit and study Torah all day long and all night long, I mean, I must be up there with like super Jews. You know, I'm in the top 500 easy of super Jews, the Fortune 500 super Jews, okay? So that's that bottle over there. The other juice. So the question is, if that's the case, why should I not consider myself a tzaddik? So the Rebbe says, the lack of self-gratifying urges for the full-time scholar is no proof whatsoever that the evil has been dislodged from its place in the animal soul. Why? I'm starting competing with a helicopter. If you can just move them a little off, please. And keep going. Rather, it's possible that the deep core of his animal soul remains lodged in the left chamber of the heart in all strength and power, but it's only that this person feels refined inwardly because his animal soul's garments, remember, the animal soul without garments can't do anything. Your thought, speech, and action. So the animal soul's garments of potentially evil thought, speech, and action have no influence over his brain, his mouth, and hands, and other parts of the body. Why? Because God has allowed the willpower of the brain to have control and dominance over the emotions of the heart. We said this last week, right? We spoke about the notion of a moach shalt al halev, that the brain really, in essence, is supposed to rule over the heart, to dictate to the heart how to feel, when to feel, what to feel, etc. Now, often, what ends up happening when people have let's just say, an inappropriate emotional response to something, and more often than not, it's not been thought through. If you thought it through, you wouldn't act this way. But we don't think it through. So we just, blurt out whatever it may be. It could be an inappropriate level of anger, an inappropriate level of love, any emotional response. Therefore, because this Beinoni who studies day and night is able to constantly take advantage of the principle that the mind rules over the heart, so then the divine soul in his brain dominates the small city, the body, all the parts of his body, so that they all become a garment and vehicle influenced exclusively by the divine soul's three garments, which are what? What are the divine souls? Thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action within the context of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. Okay, the contextual. Now we're up to section 4, page 159, where when the Beinoni succeeds partially with his deep core. Remember, last week we talked about the fact that the Beinoni is able to control sort of the external shell, if you will, the external part of himself, the emotions and the like. But the deep core, he hasn't been able to transform yet because he still has an evil inclination. If he was able to completely transform the deep core, that means that his evil inclination would be gone, that the good side would completely take over and subsume the evil side, not just to temper it, but to get rid of it. However, correct, However, the deep core of the Beinoni's divine soul has no control nor dominance over the deep core of his animal soul. That's where the battle's still happening. Now, he says the rule, however, has an exception. While the Beinoni is defined by the lack of refinement of his deep emotional core, that does not mean to say that he never succeeds at all. There are occasions, he says, where he is able to have some minimal mastery, at least over the animal soul's deep core. So even the deep core periodically can be mastered by the Beinoni. When does that happen? The Beinoni has no control over the deep core of the animal soul, except when his love for God is manifested openly, page 160, in his heart at specific times, when would you think would be a specific time that the Beinoni's heart is inflamed with God? During davening, exactly, during prayer. So, to sum this up, we put in categories Beinoni could be in. Number one, not immersed in Torah and prayer. He's going about his daily business. So he experiences urges in the animal soul during that time, but he succeeds, and he only succeeds in deflecting them through God's assistance. God helps him. Okay, during that time period of extra light shining on his soul, the deep core of the animal soul is unaffected. Number two, for a period after meditative prayer, some serious davening, he experiences urges from the animal soul and only succeeds in deflecting them through the clarity of mind that remains after prayer, the residual. We talked about that last week, right? The residual effect of the davening, it keeps him going. This enables him to make use of the principle that the brain rules over the heart. The deep core of the animal soul is still unaffected. Number three, during devotional Torah study, which would basically mean studying day and night, it's possible that he will not experience urges from the animal soul at all. If he does, he can succeed in deflecting them through the clarity of mind, which has come from his Torah study, enabling him to make use of the principle, the brain rules over the heart. The deep core of the animal soul is still unaffected. And lastly, number four, during focused meditative prayer, he may not experience urges from the animal soul. Even the deep core of the animal soul may partially be affected by his intense love of God. So if he hits stage number four, so then, although it's sporadic, but nonetheless, the deep part of the soul can be affected. So on that level, the Beinoni seems to resemble the tzaddik. Now that all of a sudden my inner core is being transformed, I'm tzaddik-esque. Okay? So why then, if that's the case, why then does the Tanya insist that the Beinoni is like a rasha? Let's just assume that the Beinoni is able to hit level 4. Not everybody can, but some Beinonis reach it. At that point, now they're affecting their inner core, like that of the tzaddik. So if that's the case, why should I, the Beinoni now, who's hit number 4, view myself like a rasha? Good question, huh? Not my own question. Okay, at the bottom of page 160. For even in this case, with the deep core of the Beinoni's animal soul's influence during meditative prayer, that influence is limited to a mere coercive control and dominance over the animal soul's deep core. Mere, for us, the point of the matter is that it's not full. Unlike the tzaddik, the Beinoni can only change part of the deep core of the animal soul in this situation, but it's temporary. It's not something which is sustained, like would be the case of the tzaddik. Top of page 161. As the verse states in Genesis, one nation shall overpower the other nation. So the word here, keyword, overpower, suggests coercion rather than transformation, right? If you have two people battling each other, one overpowers the next. So the loser is not willingly losing. He had no choice. He's overpowered, right? As Rashi comments, when the one rises, the other one falls. And when the other one rises, the first one falls. It's only one of the two of them is going to be up. The other one's going to fall. So with the Beinoni, the divine soul may rise over and influence the deep core of the animal soul, but after prayer, the situation is reversed once again. So now the Alter Rebbe continues. The divine soul overpowers and gains strength over the animal soul. Through meditative prayer, it draws on the source of gevurot, translated literally as discipline or power, which is the power of bina, cognition. I'll just explain it to you. You've seen these Kabbalistic charts, triangular, right? Goes through the various sefirot, chesed or chachma, bina, dat, chesed, gevurah, teferet. So it's 3 lines, right side, middle, and left side, right? If you take the triangles. You know what I'm talking about, more or less? Okay.
Got a picture.
All right. So what is the difference? The Kabbalah explains. So what's the underlying difference? That all of the sefirot that line up on the right side, these are the supernal sefirot as well as the powers in the soul. They have the same names, albeit one's soul-like and one is the actual makeup of the universe, a spiritual universe. So the right side essentially are all elements of chesed, of kindness. In some way, shape, or form, they relate to the concept of kindness. The left side, which at the top is bina, cognition, we just said, is basically the side of discipline, all of gevurah, strength. Because bina starts out with cognition, but beneath that is gevurah, which is that of strength. And similarly with all the rest of them that fall in line there. The one in the center are basically a coalescence of the two. So that would be dot, or that would be tiferet, beauty, which is a combination of kindness and strength, and then, continuing in downward pattern. So what does that mean? I don't know if he explains it here.
Ketzer, the combination of everything.
So Kessler is above, according to Chabad Hasidus, Kessler is above all those. So I don't want to confuse me myself.
Well, it's in the middle.
Yeah, but it's above all the rest of them. It's kind of beyond the sphere. That's my point. It's like it's beyond division. At that point, there's really no division there. Okay, so prolonged prayer. What does prolonged prayer take? In order for me to be able to spend 5 hours davening the morning prayer, what do I need to have? I need to have a lot of devotion. There's another word I'm looking for. It also starts with a D. Discipline, right? I got to be really disciplined to sit and read what I can otherwise read in 20 minutes and spend 5 hours of deep contemplation and davening with fervor, etc. Gevura, exactly. That's Gevura.
Doesn't begin with D.
Well, the discipline part does. Okay. But nonetheless, but that comes from Bina. That's the side of Bina, of cognition, of understanding in depth what I'm davening about, bringing about, evoking within myself that feeling of godliness, of love and fear, awe of God, so that now I'm able to discipline myself accordingly once I understand why I'm disciplining myself. Okay, so that's all the left side. So the meditation takes place through focusing your mind on the greatness of God, the blessed infinite one, Ein Sof, giving birth to a powerful love like flaming fire, as it says in Song of Songs, for God in your in your heart's right chamber, where the divine soul manifests, and then the sitra achra of the animal soul in the left chamber is subdued. So again, it's subdued, it's not transformed. So with the Beinoni, the negativity of the animal soul is not completely eliminated. This only happens with a tzaddik. As King David writes, regards to himself, my heart is empty within me. At that point, King David became a complete tzaddik. He totally rid himself of his evil inclination. What does it mean, my heart's empty within me? So the left ventricle of his heart got emptied, so to speak, of the animals, of the yetzer at that point in his life. It's only the tzaddik who is repulsed by evil and detests it. So in the case of a complete tzaddik, he despises evil with the utmost level of despise, of hatred. So anything which is contrary to godliness, he hates with consummate hatred. Or if it's not consummate hatred, mostly hatred, then he's like the incomplete tzaddik. He's up there, but he's not the 100% complete tzaddik. Remember, when we described the differences between the two, is that the incomplete tzaddik, what they call the incomplete tzaddik, does not have absolute despise for evil, and consequently, his love for God is also not 100%, because one's commensurate with the next. So if you have 99.9%, let's say, despise for evil, so then his love for God is also 99.9%. Now, granted, we shall have anywhere near there would be fantastic. But that's the point of the incomplete tzaddik. The complete tzaddik has abject despise, hatred for anything which is contrary or basically not conducive to godliness. All right, we're up to section 5. See if I can finish this before my time runs out here. All right, we've got 20 minutes. And I kicked off Zoom. Sitra achra means the opposite side, meaning the opposite side of holiness. Section 5, why a tzaddik might misidentify himself. With the Beinoni, the evil of his animal soul is comparable to a person who's asleep, who's able to reawaken from his sleep once again. It's like the animal soul sleeping. It's not gone, it's just sleeping. So this is how the evil exists in the Beinoni. While his heart burns with love for God, while reading Shema and praying, it says, if the evil were asleep in his heart's left side, afterwards it can wake up again. So now we go back, he says, to another one of the questions posed in chapter 1. This was regarding Rabbah I mentioned at the beginning of the lesson tonight. Rabbah said, I am a Beinoni. Rabbah was a tremendous tzaddik. So we wonder, how's it possible for Rabbah, who was a tzaddik, to mistakenly call himself a Beinoni? He didn't joke around about these things. So now we know that the evil in the animal soul of a Beinoni can simply be asleep and dormant, right? It makes sense where Rabbah could conceive himself as a Beinoni. In other words, he looked at himself and his animal soul was dormant. It was sleeping. Well, it wouldn't speak up. So he could, even though he was an absolute tzaddik, in case Rabbah, it made sense. I could be a Beinoni. I mean, at the higher level of a Beinoni, where I don't sin, or I only do not sin, but my animal soul's it's dormant. It's there, but it doesn't speak up. It's like the Beinoni during this ecstatic time of saying Shema or davening. But with this case of Rabbah, it'd be all day. But he can still think he's a Beinoni. So that's why Rabbah looked at himself as a Beinoni, even though he possessed both the external and internal experience of a tzaddik. Externally, he did not allow his mouth to stop uttering words of Torah. And internally, God's Torah was his delight day and night. And the delight he experienced during his study was passionate like that of a tzaddik, with a desire, fervor, and longing of a craving soul for God with great love at the level when reciting the Shema and during prayer. So therefore, Rabbah considered himself like a Beinoni who spends his whole day davening. So assume that the Beinoni was able to keep this great level of spiritual ecstasy that he has during the recitation of Shema or Amida and keep it going all day long, which a Beinoni normally cannot. But the Rabbah is thinking, I can do this, then I must be like a Beinoni who has full control. It's like I'm doing the Shema ecstasy all day. And therefore, he thought himself to be a Beinoni, mistakenly, but he thought himself to be a Beinoni. So our sages of blessed memory taught that while there are only 3 obligatory prayer services, Shachris, Mincha, Maariv, morning, afternoon, and evening, nonetheless, the Talmud says, our sages say, that if only a person would spend the whole day in prayer. So there's this notion, based on what the Talmud says, halavai. Halavai means like, if only. We should spend a whole day davening. So, but if you did spend your whole day davening, and you were one of these Beinonim, and you were able to sort of sustain this level of great devotion to God, like would be doing Shema, but all day long.
Unless you're a rabbi.
Well, as a rabbi, that's why I became a rabbi. Exactly. The only reason. So that's why, quote, even if the entire world tells you you're a tzaddik, you should consider yourself like a rasha, meaning like a Beinoni, because even if you never experienced an urge for sin or self-gratification, you might just be like a Beinoni who prays all day long, that is otherwise indistinguishable from a tzaddik in his own life. He thinks he's a tzaddik because my yetzer, my evil inclination went to sleep and never woke up. But it's still there. Now, on page 164. So now the extent of the Beinoni's love during prayer, about which we've spoken, which comes through a strengthening of the divine soul over the animal soul. When you compare the Beinoni is compared with the level of tzaddik who worship God with absolute authenticity. It's not sporadic throughout the day. It's all day, every day. This type of love of the Beinoni cannot be classified as genuine worship. Why? Because in the case of the Beinoni, it dissipates after prayer. So that's not absolute truth. Absolute truth means it's ever sustaining. If something is true, it's always true. True? Okay? But if it's not absolutely true, then there are times, perhaps it might be true, sometimes not the other time, but that's not absolute truth. It can have elements of truth to it, but it's not abject truth. So, as he puts it, if something is not sustainable, it's probably not a genuine property, but the result of an external influence. So from Proverbs, it states, truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. In other words, if it's true for all eternity. A lie is good for a little while, or for a moment, a fleeting moment. But nevertheless, this is the only one we contrast the love of the Beinoni to that of a tzaddik. But with regard to the level of the Beinanim, are capable of achieving the Beinoni's love during prayer, which later passes, can be classified as ideal worship, which is absolutely authentic for him. Each individual relative to his level among the different levels of Beinonim. In other words, if the highest level I can reach is that of Beinoni, because that's all God will allow me to do, so my absolute truth is reaching the level of Beinoni. Even though to a tzaddik, my level of Beinoni is not true. It's not truth. Okay, to the tzaddik, I'm way down at the bottom. That's not truth for him. For me, though, in my case, it's subjective to me. It is absolute truth. That's what God has enabled me to do. So, in the case of the Beinoni, it's called true service of God. He's really working on himself to get to where he is. So now the Tanya explains why the love experienced by the Beinoni during davening is genuine. It's not. You might think, you know what? Okay, so the Beinoni gets to this great spiritual ecstasy when he says Shema or he davens. That's great. But if it's not sustaining, then it's not true. It's false. I mean, if it's sustaining, if it's true, then it should be always true, not just during sporadic times of the day. But now we come to understand that even, I'll read it. Top of 165. And I also consider their love during their prayers as not just relatively genuine, but categorically genuine on the level of truthful lips endure forever. This is the case of the Beinoni. Why is that the case? Why do we say if the Beinoni is not able to sustain that great level of love for Hashem throughout the entire day? Why is it true love? It's true love when it's happening, fine. But how about the rest of the day? If it's not sustainable throughout the rest of the day, then there's something wrong with it from its inception, you would think. So the answer is no. In the case of the Beinoni, it is considered true. Why? Because the Beinoni, if he wanted to, at any given time, can get back into that spiritual ecstasy. He has, in a sense, disciplined himself to such a degree that if he wants to get back into that mode, he has the access straight in. Unlike the rest of us, we're a work in progress. Okay? So therefore, in the case of the Beinoni, it's considered to be truth. Section 7, what is truth? Page 165. Now, the trait of truth was Jacob's paradigm. Okay, so according to Kabbalah, I'll just read this. Got you outside. Is that time? Yeah, we'll read it. Okay. According to the Kabbalah, biblical stories are not merely an historical, instructional narrative. They depict the emergence of fundamental spiritual energies. The patriarchs, for example, were not merely individuals of significance. They each embodied a paradigm, a radically new way of living which influences us all. So it's not just like something to read about or a site to go visit where they're buried. Jacob says the Zohar embodied the paradigm of truth. Yaakov was considered to be absolute truth. Jacob's essential character was that of an honest man, as it says in Breshit, whose mouth was consistent with his heart, not attuned to dishonesty. As the third of the patriarchs, Jacob integrated the energies which had preceded him, Abraham's path of benevolence and Isaac's way of restraint. Abraham's benevolence of spirit is crucial for mankind, but if overdone, too much kindness is also not good. Will lead to unworthy causes, and on a personal level, causes dysfunction, immorality, and addiction. Isaac's path of restraint resolves many of these issues, but also has side effects of rigidity, harshness, and obsessive compulsive behavior, which is also not good. So what is Yaakov? Top of page 166. Jacob's third paradigm aims to selectively apply benevolence and restraint so as to optimize their virtues and eliminate undesirable effects. It's a coalescence, a good combination of both. This is the path of truth, since, as we have seen, truth is synonymous with sustainability, and the elimination of undesirable effects makes a project sustainable. So in the biblical narrative, we see that Jacob's path was completely sustainable in that all of his children followed in his way, continued his faith, which was not the case of that of Avram and not the case of that of Yitzchak. Avram had Ishmael, and Yitzchak had that of Esau. So in the words of the Zohar, Yaakov, what does this refer to? Yaakov and the paradigm of truth are also referred to in the Zoharic language as the central bar supporting the tabernacle, which reaches from one end to the other. If you remember in the construction of the tabernacle in the desert, right? So it was made up of various boards. Remember, they have to assemble it, disassemble it, etc. So what kept it all together? So in addition to various other things, they had one central bar that actually went through the center of each one of the boards and miraculously made 90-degree angles in a box or in a rectangle. Now, a bar doesn't naturally bend itself, but this was a supernatural thing. But that bar basically combined the entire, put together and held together the entire sanctuary. Thus, in a sense, making it the bar of truth. It's what held it, sustained it. I'm sorry, where am I up to here? So the hallmark of truth, then, is its all pervasiveness expressed by its sustainability under all circumstances and in every context, from the highest of elevations and planes to the lowest of all rungs. The great virtue of truth is it just works, regardless of your physical or spiritual address. So at each elevation and level, just as the central bar passed through the middle of the tabernacle's wall, truth penetrates the focal point of any world or idea, which is the pivotal point of its truth paradigm. As he puts it in simple terms, Tanya is teaching. You have logged in from another device. The Tanya is teaching us that truth is not a single standard, but something which is calibrated in context. In other words, what might be abject truth to you may not be abject truth to him in terms of your service to Hashem. Because, again, your truth is the way Hashem created you with your potential. That's your truth. His potential, her potential is not your potential. And it's not your truth. Okay, so we're not talking about, in terms of whether Torah is true or not true. This is with the understanding that all of Torah is true. But on a more subjective level, when it comes to my truth and to my service to Hashem, what's absolutely true for me is not necessarily true for somebody else, and vice versa. Okay, so when we said before that the Beinoni's love was true for him, we were not exercising poetic license. And it's just making it sound nice, to make it all work. Truth, at least in its Kabbalistic understanding, means different things in different contexts. And for the Beinoni, true worship is having palpable love for God, even if it's only during prayer. That's his truth. And the paradigm of truth is what the Talmud refers to as Jacob's unlimited inheritance, meaning it has no upper metaphysical limit reaching to the highest of elevations. So, in other words, you can find the truth of 100, for argument's sake. But you can go up to 1,000. I mean, for me, it's 100. But really, there's 1,000 levels or more. There's 100,000 levels. So would that imply my truth is meaningless? Because my truth only goes up to 100. That's my maximum capacity. But in reality, true capacity is 1,000,000, whatever the number may be. So the Alter Rebbe, in the words he puts it over here, basically Gemara says that it has no upper metaphysical limit. In other words, it's endless. In terms of our growth and being able to serve Hashem, it's really endless for all intents and purposes. Reaching to the highest of elevations. So just as God promised Jacob, you will spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, in all directions without any limitations, Jacob's paradigm of truth too has no metaphysical limitations, because we're spreading out everywhere. We're not limited to any one direction. His inheritance, the Jewish people. As that applies in the physical level, it applies metaphysically as well, albeit in this case, sort of like to infinity. And all the lower levels and rungs are of no significance when compared with the levels and rungs above them. So, since the world depends on God and is not sustainable independently from him, the world is not true when compared with God. Meaning, everything you see here, relative to Hashem, is not considered true. Because God is the ultimate of truth. Nothing in our world can reach God himself. So therefore, anything lower than the ultimate truth, which is that of God himself, is not true relative to God. To us, it's true. It's true that this is a cup. You can argue, say it's not a cup. Fine, call whatever you want. We can spend all day long and tell me how many molecules are in it, what it's made up of, etc. But for all intents and purposes, the world calls this a cup. Okay? And anything else. So it's in my life, it's true. Am I talking to you now? You're not really sure. It's true. I am. It's being recorded. At least that's what it says on my screen. If my screen says so, it must be true. Okay? But in reality, relative to Hashem, none of this is absolute truth because we're so much lower than him. And that applies to any level within a human being in terms of the spiritual service to God. Let's say, for argument's sake, you're at level 100. I'm throwing out numbers. And someone else is at level 99. So level 99 is not true to you being on level 100. Follow? That's the idea. To get a little Kabbalistic here, as is known to stages of esoteric wisdom, something considered the head, and is that closed? Oh, thank you. If you don't mind, just open. Something considered the head. Oh, we got 6 people going to open it. This is. Look at the respect we give them here, huh? Just leave it open. Danny, leave it open. Leave it open. Danny, leave it open. Yeah, it's fine. They're inside the shul. Okay, so as the stages, it's known to the stages of esoteric wisdom that something considered the head and brain of lower rungs is actually inferior to something considered the heels and feet of higher rungs. Meaning, let's say, for argument's sake, here's the higher rung, here's the lower rung. And now at the bottom of this rung is the feet and the heels, okay, of the higher rung. It's considered higher than the head of the lower rung. Follow? So the lower rung is nothing compared to this, to the higher rung, even though it's just the feet and the heels of the higher rung. As our sages of blessed memory taught, the distance, this is from the Gemara, it says the distance from the earth to the firmament is the journey of 500 years, and the thickness of the firmament is the journey of 500 years. And likewise, the distance between one firmament and the other, and above them, the 7 heavens, are like the holy living creatures, the Chayes HaKodesh, and the feet of the living creatures are equal to all of them together. But this is more allegorical. What does it mean 500 years? What is the distance of 500 years supposed to mean? They're not light years. So how do you measure 500 years? So the Gemara, the Talmud in Tractate Chagiga, describes it that a person can walk, it's called 10 parselet. Let's say it's 10 miles a day, an average person. I'm not average because I can probably do 2, maybe 5 on a good day. Okay, but let's assume it's a parsel is a little less than a mile, whatever, or roughly a mile, let's say. Okay, so that's what an average person can walk. So if you were to take how much the distance a person can walk over 500 years, it comes out to, I think, there's various opinions how big a parsec is, but somewhere on the order of like 4.2 to 5.5 million miles. Okay, that's 500 years in between each firmament. Now, obviously, the firmaments are not physical. It's not something like you can't walk from one to the next. And the distance, but the point that's being made here more on an allegorical level is that the distance, like the physical distance, quote unquote, the spiritual distance between one firmament and the one above it is astronomical. Okay, so the spiritual level of firmament 2 relative to firmament 1, let's say at the bottom, is astronomical. And all the more so from 1 to 3, and then 3 to 5, etc. That's the point. So as that exists so there's this astronomical exponential divide, he calls it, between each rung of the spiritual hierarchy. At each plane, everything below it is considered to be insignificant. So is the case with the Beinoni. The case of the Beinoni and the tzaddik. So with the case of the Beinoni, let's say, reaches the highest level of his particular Beinoni hood, for lack of a better term. That's as much as he can get to. That's as much as God has endowed him in terms of abilities. That's absolute truth for him. Even though to the tzaddik who's above him, it's considered like nothing. It's false. It's not real. It's not truth. Because for the tzaddik, it doesn't work. The tzaddik has his own level of truth. And within the levels of tzaddikim, there are many, many levels of tzaddikim. There are myriads of levels. Okay, so one tzaddik who's on a higher level relative to the one below him is like truth and falsehood, so to speak. And this obviously applies not just to a tzaddik and a Beinoni, it applies to all of us. There goes my phone, dying. That's ultimately sort of helps to describe, okay, obviously the life of the Beinoni, which is the focus of this book. But in essence, in our own lives, we took this and transposed the concept to ourselves on an independent level. It's not an excuse to say, well, I can't do anymore because my truth, this is my truth. How can you argue with my truth? You don't know my truth. I'll tell you my truth. I may not even know my own truth in reality. we're very good at self-limiting. We, meaning as people, we're excellent at doing that job. I can't do this, right? If I say I can't do it, that's a good excuse not to do it because I can't. You can't expect me to do something I can't do. So what does the word can't do really mean? Who said I can't do it? I said I can't do it. Does it mean I really can't do it? If pushed up against the wall with absolutely no choice, can I sometimes push myself and figure it out? The answer is obviously yes. Right? It's like the old story in the Reader's Digest. I don't know from what year, choose the year. I'm sure it's one of the Reader's Digest about, the mother who, has her baby stuck under the car. She lifts up the car by herself, pulls the baby out. Now, is it possible that a woman, even a guy, they're going to lift up some 3,000 pound or whatever is behemoth? No, it's not physically possible on any given day. But the Reader's Digest says so. If that's the case, then it's like, from the Bible, I guess, the Bible of Reader's Digest. But these stories can happen. Why? Because at that point, you somehow garner strength, which is far beyond what you thought was ever possible. Even though you said I can't. So stop saying I can't. Say I can't. I don't want to. That's a different story. But be honest. I may not want to. Can? I absolutely can. The more you believe that you can, the can-do attitude, the higher we are going to succeed in life. And that is chapter 13. With that, we're going to move on to the Farbrengen. If you want to stick around, we got food, more food, and some, I'm going to shut the Zoom here, ladies and gentlemen. I don't mean to be rude, but Farbrengen, my phone is about to die. I made it this far, so I want to thank you, Verizon, or Verizon sponsor on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, have a good night. If you want to come to Farbrengen, we're starting right now, 8:30 here. It's about 80 degrees where I'm sitting. Like me, más o menos. Yes, exactly. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.